The MBTA Communities Law is a hot topic, and here in Massachusetts, it's seen as the tip of the spear for the housing crisis. In fact, the Spotlight team at the Boston Globe just stirred the pot pretty recently with a big piece on it. Today, let me explain why this is an ongoing issue in a lot of towns. I'm Craig Power with Power Realty Advisors, located in Marshfield, Mass, one of the MBTA communities involved in this. Let's give you some background here to start, but then I want to lay out what might be coming down the pike with new developments and legal battles. First off, what is the MBTA Communities Law? So let's define it for you. So communities served, they fit into one of four buckets, right? But communities served by the MBTA are required to establish at least one zoning district of by right multifamily housing located within a half mile of some public transit, right? They're required to meet a certain zoning capacity. I'm not gonna go through all the specifics here. It varies town to town. It's an effort that originated with the Charlie Baker administration, where they're trying to encourage production of transit-oriented multifamily housing. And again, they're not running around, it's zoning specifically. So they're not running around and planning out these specific developments. It's not 40B, it's an alternative to 40B, and they're having these towns rezone certain parts of the map. The zoning changes are being left to these towns to figure out, right? They're given the parameters, and each town's faced with dedicating a certain area to be upzoned. So these conversations are about how many units do we need? How many floors can we build up? It's a rezoning, but then that leaves the market and individual interests to dictate what actually happens. Let me throw a couple quick off-the-cuff hypotheticals at you. So you have a brand new 4-unit building, just got built the last few years. That gets upzoned to 6 units. Are they gonna tear that building down and build a new 6-unit building? Not super likely, right? But then, in the example, you rezone this one part of the map, and included in it is an old standalone commercial building, possibly older, possibly decaying, and now they can build up to 4 floors on that. That is a new highest and best use of the property, right? So the market would look at that and say, what can we do with this? This is now worth more to us than it was before. It's worth more to the owner, probably, than it was before. There are 4 different categories each town fits into. There's rapid transit, there's commuter rail communities, there's adjacent communities, I believe that's what my town fits into, and adjacent small towns. They're all up against different deadlines for this. Rapid transit deadline, I believe, is the 1st, and I believe is still the end of this year. So all in all, the development side of this rezoning is going to give developers and real estate owners an opportunity to stamp their mark in these new zones. The Spotlight team for the Boston Globe recently put out a piece on Milton, and they're grappling over this issue. The MBTA Communities Law highlighted both sides of the issue. It also went through a history of opposition to multifamily and affordable housing. You can tell it's a super hot debate. It's only gonna get hotter. It's seen as an issue that affects class, race, people with disabilities. For me, I tend to just look at it through a lens of affordable life and happiness in modern America. It's already lighting up town meetings all over the state. And I encourage your involvement, right? No matter which side you're on, but especially the younger contingent, who I can tell you for sure underrepresented at these town meetings. What the Spotlight piece got into, but really why I wanted to talk about this, I've gotten pretty in-depth detail on 4 South Shore towns, 5 if you include Milton and reading that piece. I sat through my own towns, and I will tell you, much of the conversation is about non-compliance. It is not about, well, can we rezone here or here? Can we encourage development here? No, it is, we flat out shouldn't do this. What are the repercussions? I'm not saying from the town leadership, I'm saying from their constituents, right? I'm not saying that. In fact, in Marshfield, I would commend the leadership. They definitely have a grip on the issue. They're not gonna watch this bullshit anyways, but I can tell you a lot of what's coming back at the leadership is, we shouldn't do this. What are the repercussions? What's the state telling us? And fuck it, we're gonna vote it down anyway. As of now, the repercussions are losing the ability to get grants, right? So for example, community planning grants, land use planning grants. There was one in Marshfield I remember looking at, a collaborative workspace program, for example. It provides funding to support collaborative workspaces. The idea is to support smaller business, so that goes away as a repercussion of this. Again, I went to a town workshop in Marshfield where they were going through the MBTA Communities Law and the implications, and with the grants, they didn't blow it off, but they didn't seem to think the town was utilizing a ton of the grants, right? And again, super competent on the issue. They definitely recognize there's a home affordability crisis, so they seem really on top of it. But I can tell you the repercussions for the town and the non-compliance felt to me pretty minimal. But it is unclear what will happen later. That's what I wanted to get to. The AG's office has commented on this. I have it here. So MBTA communities cannot avoid their obligations under the law by foregoing this funding, states the Attorney General's advisory. The law requires that MBTA communities shall have a compliant zoning district and does not provide any mechanism by which a town or city may opt out of this requirement. If you've ever heard of the HBO miniseries Show Me a Hero, it's created by the guy who did The Wire years ago. It's a good show, and it's based on affordable housing in Yonkers, New York. It's based on a true story. I see a lot of parallels to that miniseries and the debate around the MBTA Communities Law today, right? A little early to make a direct comparison, but I think I would call it recommended viewing. What ended up happening there was the state government, a judge in particular, came down very hard on Yonkers financially. So we will see what ends up happening to these individual towns, what the state really ends up doing if they want to really lay the hammer down. From my quick thoughts to wrap up, it's no secret I'm in favor of more housing in an effort to combat the affordability problem. It's a huge problem. I see it every day. I work with a lot of buyers. These are people with good jobs. They're doing everything right, and they don't have a prayer at buying a home in the areas they grew up in or even nearby, right? So that's a huge problem to me. But for the law itself, right? The MBTA Communities Law, in my view, is aggressive and not very nuanced. That's true. But there's a part of me that says, look, if they did approach it, if the state approached it on a more case-by-case basis, the individual towns would still rebel against it. They would still push back against it. So as I said, the counterpoint, the opposition to it, is not out there presenting alternatives. The pros to me are, I appreciate that the state is taking action. It's a huge economic problem. I can only say that so many times. Very little is being done on a federal level to help with the affordability problem. The other pro to me is I am in favor, generally, of more relaxed by right zoning. A lot of towns in Massachusetts, we are famous for our red tape. A lot of towns want to do everything by special permit. And in the era of the home affordability crisis, that's an obvious area we can, we don't need to reset the whole board, right? We don't need to reset the whole board, but it makes sense to take these zoning density charts and take those minimums down a little bit. Just take them down a little bit, right? Give the market something, right? Look at the situation in housing. Don't overcorrect, but give the market something. I have other suggestions to combat the housing crisis, but I'll save them for a future video. I've really turned against Airbnb, but I'll get into it another day. The con or the criticism is mostly the lack of nuance, at least from me. Marshfield's a good example. We're considered, I think, an adjacent community. I'm sure everybody thinks their own town is a good example. But we have no commuter rail station. The opportunities to rezone to the standard are just not very intuitive, and the area that we end up selecting could be not the best or most appropriate area. If the mandate was rezone for X units and don't be so limited, right, by the transit-oriented part, that might be better. On the transit-oriented, right, of course they're concerned with transportation, decent walkability, limiting traffic, all part of this green initiative that everybody's focused on, and I know everybody's heart is in the right place. I'm all in favor of anything to serve the environment, but an added focus on redeveloping, using what's already in place, preserving resources, that would be another effective approach to sustainability with all this. So that's just my 2 cents. In conclusion, I would like to see some lubrication on both sides of this. I would like the people in these towns, the most active ones, are generally older. I want them to wake up to the reality of the home affordability crisis and how it is affecting the upward mobility and really the mindset of the younger generations. And then I'd like the state to go to these towns on the other side and say, okay, if you refuse to put this here, if you're telling us you don't have the infrastructure, which get ready to hear that word a lot, infrastructure, what's better for you? Or better yet, what action are you going to take, right? And this is what I mean. I still doubt a lot of these towns would take that as an olive branch, okay? So look, get your popcorn and go to your next town meeting. Thanks for watching. Please rip me apart in the comments, or better yet, insult me to my face and email me at craig@powerrealtyboston.com. Have a wonderful day.